Welcome to the Common Man Football Show. My name is James Coburn, and today's episode we're going to be talking about Chris Harris Jr., the cornerback from the Denver Broncos. We have not done a lot of cornerback analytics. I mean, we've been doing a lot of running back, quarterback stuff, wide receiver stuff. Of course, we did some offensive line stuff, but I figured, you know what, let's do some cornerback analytics stuff. Let's do some cornerback analytics stuff with a current NFL superstar in Chris Harris Jr., who in many ways is a PFF darling. PFF loves Chris Harris, and what's not to love about Chris Harris? But I think there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to cornerback, production at the college level, production, also athleticism. I think there's a lot of misconceptions in terms of the amount of athleticism you need to have, and there's also lots of misconceptions when people talk about the fact that the NFL draft is just a crapshoot and nobody knows what they're doing. And look at Chris Harris Jr., he was successful, and stuff like that, basically. Like, oh, Chris Harris Jr. was successful, so see, analytics doesn't matter. The NFL doesn't know what they're doing. It's just a crapshoot. If you looked at Chris Harris Jr. in terms of his college production and his athleticism, he graded out as a Pro Bowl running back. In fact, a high-end Pro Bowl running back in terms of his overall athleticism and his production, which we'll get into. But just to familiarize yourself with some of the terms we're going to be talking about, market share production, at least defensive market share production, is where you take an individual defensive statistic and you divide it by the team total statistic. So in this case, if you take solo tackles, so say a cornerback had 50 solo tackles on a team that had 500 solo tackles and that cornerback had 10% solo tackle market share production, you take that number and you compare it to every single cornerback performance since the 1989 NFL draft class, and then boom, you have a statistical model. You're able to see how guys like Deion Sanders performed in terms of that metric, and how Patrick Peterson performed in terms of this metric, and just to get an idea, okay, this is how well they performed, this is where cornerbacks should be compared to past Pro Bowl players. And then, of course, we're going to look at athleticism data. Basically, the three main ones I use is explosive lower body strength, which takes the vertical and the broad jump measured against mass density. We're going to look at the speed score, which is the 40-yard dash measured against mass density, and then we're also going to look at the flexibility score, which is the short shell / three cone measured against mass density, which is also fairly important at the cornerback position as well in terms of your ability to be flexible. It helps in lots of different ways. But those are the things we're going to be looking at. We're also going to be looking at his NFL production in terms of how he performed in terms of NFL market share production, which was pretty dang well as well. And with that out of the way, let's get to Chris Harris in terms of his production and, of course, in terms of his athleticism at the college level. So starting out with Chris Harris Jr. in terms of his market share production at the college level, he was an elite level producer at the college level in terms of his market share production. He had a 98.04 solo tackle market share score. He had a 98.88 pass deflection market share score. The bottom end threshold for all-pro cornerbacks since the 1989 NFL draft class when it comes to solo tackle market share is 60.73 out of 100. The bottom end threshold for Pro Bowlers is 16.23. There's only one guy, that was Antonio Cromartie, who scored that level, and of course he was a guy who was injured most of his career in Florida State and also was kind of a backup. He got injured in his last year and just declared for the NFL. So he didn't really, that's like a special case. And of course you have the average in terms of the bottom threshold for pass deflection market share is 62.78. The bottom end threshold is 20.25 for pass deflection market share. That also is Antonio Cromartie. He's the only guy who scored that low to become a Pro Bowl cornerback since 1989. Then you get to the averages. The average solo tackle market share score for a cornerback is 74.74 out of 100 in terms of solo tackles. 68.39 in terms of Pro Bowl cornerbacks in terms of solo tackle market share. 78.34 in terms of pass deflection market share for all pro cornerbacks since 1989, and 70.21 in terms of Pro Bowl cornerbacks since 1989. And when you look at Chris Harris, he killed it in everything. I mean, he was 90 percentile, 98 percentile or higher in terms of his solo tackle market share production and his pass deflection market share production. He killed it in terms of his production. I mean, there's no other way to say it. And then when you look at his athleticism, getting into his athleticism, he had a 65.65 explosive lower body strength score, a 78.38 speed score, and a 72.19 flexibility score. And based on the athleticism data, he doesn't quite hit all-pro level production, not production, but athleticism, because The All-Pro threshold, the bottom-end threshold for All-Pro cornerbacks is 76.02 in terms of explosiveness. The bottom-end threshold in terms of majority of All-Pro cornerbacks is 88.25 in terms of speed score, which he doesn't quite hit that level of speed. And then in terms of his flexibility, he only had 72.19, which is lower than the 76.41 in terms of the All-Pro threshold. But when you look at the Pro Bowl threshold, he hits all those marks out of the park. He basically surpasses the explosive lower body strength score, he surpasses the speed score, and he surpasses the flexibility score, which the bottom end thresholds are right here in terms of Pro Bowl thresholds. So Chris Harris, essentially, coming out of college, had the profile of a Pro Bowl level cornerback. He had extremely high-end production. 98 percentile or higher is ridiculous, guys. I don't know how else to... most of the time you're just looking for a guy that's above average in terms of cornerback production, but he was 98 percentile or higher. And then, of course, you look at his athleticism, he hits all the marks of a Pro Bowl cornerback. So from the very get-go, guys, Chris Harris Jr. should have been drafted a heck of a lot higher than the NFL thought he should have been drafted. So that just kind of speaks to that. And then, of course, you get to his actual NFL production. All his marks are great. Just to explain some of the sort of terms here, MSPER is solo tackle mark share production compared to peers. MSIPR is interception mark share compared to peers. And MSPD PER is pass deflection mark share compared to peers in terms of that number. And the total impact PER is all those numbers combined compared to everybody else in terms of how much impact they had on their defenses. And when you look at Chris Harris in terms of his entire career, he's been above average in every single metric. His best year in terms of his total impact in terms of the ball was in 2012 with a 91.76 overall score, which is elite level production for a cornerback. 2013, he's basically been an above average cornerback his entire career, a Pro Bowl level cornerback, if that, in his entire career as a Denver Bronco, with only a dip in 2015. That was the only year where he kind of dipped a bit in terms of his market share. In terms of his pass deflection market share, it's the only thing that kind of dragged him down a bit in terms of 2015. But when you look at his production at the NFL level, he fits all the marks of a Pro Bowl level cornerback. I'm not discounting the fact that his production probably dipped a bit because teams just stopped throwing his way, but the majority of cornerbacks, great or not, usually have a season where they prove it or not. Nnamdi Asomugha, the reason why quarterbacks didn't throw at Nnamdi Asomugha, for a certain period of time in the NFL, is because he had that season where he had a bunch of interceptions, and then quarterbacks just said, it ain't worth it, Cornerbacks have to have that type of season, a lot of times. They have that one season where they just prove that, hey, don't throw at me, it's gone. And in Chris Harris's case, he definitely had a couple seasons like that, and that's why his production would dip a little bit because teams are throwing his way. However, if you look at PFF grades, if you believe in any of that stuff, even if you don't, based on his athleticism, based on his production out of college, he profiles as a Pro Bowl, if not even better type of cornerback, with the only exception of athleticism kind of caps his upside a bit, but he has all the makings of a Pro Bowl high-end cornerback. He's proven so far to be that type of guy when it comes to production at the NFL level, and it would not surprise me to see a guy like him, get more recognition as the years go on, because he pretty much has all the kind of stuff that you're looking at. Which ultimately brings us to the last sort of thing, at least in conclusion. What should be clear about Chris Harris Jr. is that NFL teams do not understand cornerback evaluation. They really don't. Cornerback evaluation is not entirely about arm length. Arm length can inform upside. Again, 32-inch arm length is kind of the threshold for all pro cornerbacks since the 1999 NFL draft class, because I don't have arm length thresholds past that time period because it's just not available. But sure, if you want to get a all-pro cornerback, you want to get guys that have 32-inch arm length. But all those guys who had 32-inch arm length also had high-end production thresholds. And you don't need to have 32-inch arm length to be a Pro Bowl level cornerback based on the data as well. There's tons of cornerbacks that only have 31-inch arm length that became multiple Pro Bowl cornerbacks. Kind of like Chris Harris Jr. So I think that because the NFL has become so centered on just getting these tall cornerbacks that have long arms, they're ignoring the guys like Chris Harris Jr., who may not be the tallest, may not have the longest arms, but they have very good athleticism traits in terms of Pro Bowl athleticism traits. They had very good production, especially in Chris Harris's case. And those are the things you need to be looking at. I mean, sure, if you have a tiebreaker, if you have cornerback A that is 6'2" and has long arms and is great on tape and has great production and great athleticism, and you have another guy who's 5'10" and has great production, great athleticism, great tape, sure, go with the 6'2" guy. But if you have a 6'2" guy who isn't productive, a 6'2" guy who is kind of meh as an athlete, why would you put that guy over the 5'10" corner who has elite production, great athleticism, and great overall traits? That's my point, I guess I'm trying to get at, is the cornerback position has become to a point where NFL teams feel like they just need to get 32-inch arm tall guys when you need to be just looking for good cornerbacks. You're going to hit on cornerbacks a heck of a lot more when you just look for the ones that have great production, great athleticism traits, and of course have great film. And in Chris Harris's case, it's pretty clear, based on all the stuff that I showed you, if you were a GM and I told you, this is Chris Harris in terms of his production at the college level, this is Chris Harris in terms of his athleticism, which is Pro Bowl threshold, would you have let that guy drop all the way to day 3? I don't think so. So again, my name is James Coburn. You can find my work at draftcoburn.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Geometrics. And if you like this content and you want more content like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Share this video as well with anybody that you know, and I will talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.